Hello, and thank you so much for joining me for this fourth episode of our first season of this Women of the Bible series. As we conclude Women's History Month, we are also closing out this first season, a series that has focused on women in the Bible who were marginalized by society, but through faith and alignment with God, were able to overcome their circumstances and become impactful figures in history. Today, we will be discussing the story of Ruth. Personally, Ruth is my favorite figure in the Old Testament. Every time I read her story and journey and really sit with her strength and her loyalty, it always touches me and inspires me. There's also a book I highly recommend. It's called She Still Got It by Liz Curtis Higgs, which walks you through Ruth's story in a very relatable and modern way. But what makes Ruth's story so compelling is that it carries a different kind of strength. Not loud, not forceful, but steady, grounded, and chosen. Ruth's story also introduces us to the Moabites. The Moabites were descendants of Lot, Abraham's nephew, so there's a distant familial connection to Israel. However, over time, the relationship became strained. The Moabites did not follow the God of Israel, and there were tensions between the two groups. Because of this, Moabites were often seen as outsiders. And this makes Ruth's story even more compelling. She is a foreigner choosing to step into a people and a faith that were not originally hers. The story begins with Naomi, an Israelite woman living in Bethlehem. A famine hits the land, specifically impacting Bethlehem and the surrounding region, which leads Naomi, her husband, and her two sons to leave and settle in Moab. Moab becomes a place of survival. So while there, her sons marry Moabite women, Ruth and Orpah, and over time, Naomi's husband and both of her sons eventually pass away. Naomi is left with no husband, no sons, and no clear future. We've seen this before in Tamar's story. This kind of situation left women extremely vulnerable with no protection, no provision, and no stability. So Naomi decides to return to Bethlehem. Before leaving, she tells her daughters-in-law to stay behind in Moab. She says, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me." Ruth 1:8. She continues, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands?" Ruth 1:11. Orpah listens and she returns to her family. But Ruth chooses differently. She says, "Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." Ruth 1:16. Ruth's decision is not just about Naomi. It's about alignment with God. She chooses faith before she sees the outcome. She steps into uncertainty without guarantees. When they arrive in Bethlehem, Ruth begins working in the fields to provide for herself and Naomi. She gleans, basically collecting leftover grain after harvest. This was physically demanding work. And this moment matters because it shows how much she was willing to sacrifice to support her mother-in-law. She remained committed to Naomi even after her husband had passed. That is true loyalty. The field Ruth works in belongs to a man named Boaz, who is part of Naomi's extended family. Boaz notices Ruth because of her character, her consistency, her humility, her loyalty. Over time, Boaz becomes a kinsman-redeemer, someone who has the legal rights to restore and protect a family line. This connects back to Tamar's story, where there's a responsibility to care for a widow. But the difference here is Boaz carries it out, and he does it with honor, with integrity, and it reflects the kind of man he was. Eventually, Boaz marries Ruth. Ruth and Boaz have a son named Obed. Obed becomes the father of Jesse. Jesse becomes the father of King David. And from the same line comes Jesus Christ. So Ruth, like Tamar and Rahab before her, becomes part of the genealogy of Christ. Ruth's story is often romanticized, right? You hear women sometimes say, "Oh, I'm waiting for my Boaz," or "I found my Boaz." But that's not the core of the story. There's no dramatic confrontation, no bold declaration. Ruth's story is built through consistency, through staying, through choosing to build from exactly where she was. Personally, as someone who's very loyal, I deeply relate to Ruth's spirit. But there's also parts of her character that I'm still working to build. Her consistency, her willingness to accept the situation as it is without trying to control everything. And that's something I'm still learning. I'm naturally a planner. I like structure. I like control. I plan my days. I think through risks, right? It's part of who I am to the core, even professionally. But Ruth's story challenges that. What happens when you let go and let God lead? But you stay consistent. You stay faithful. You still show up. And you trust that God will take it from there. Not everything has to be a big controlled moment. God is also present in the quiet, consistent ones. And even in those seasons, He is still building your story. He does not require constant bold moves to fulfill His plan. Sometimes being consistent in faith, trust, and loyalty is exactly how He moves the story forward. So, as we close out this first season, there's a pattern that we can now clearly see. At critical moments in biblical history, when systems fail or people make flawed decisions, women step in and protect the future of the covenant. Tamar ensures the continuation of Judah's lineage. Rahab protects Israel's mission in Jericho. Ruth preserves and advances the family line that leads to King David. And all three become part of the genealogy of Jesus. This is not accidental. It shows that God's story moves forward through unexpected people in unexpected ways. So, where are you in your journey? The journey of alignment comes in seasons. Sometimes you're in the wilderness where you feel unseen. Sometimes you're in a season where you're called to take action and stand up for what is right. And sometimes you're in a season where you simply let go, trust that God is in control, and remain faithful and consistent. In whatever season you're in, the most important thing is to choose alignment with God. Whether it is your quiet season or your bold move, choose to include God in that journey, consistently and intentionally. Thank you so much for joining me each and every Sunday this month as we explore these impactful, inspirational, powerful women of the Bible. No worries though, we'll continue this journey again in May as we move on to our second season of the series, where we'll look into women who held influential and powerful roles, but yet they still chose to align with God. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope that you all had an amazing Palm Sunday. I'll see you next season.